war machine for it.
Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room.
Here's Johnny.
What is your major malfunction, numbnuts?
Hi there, my little droogies.
Film Church.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
Maybe there's no peace in this world. For us or for anyone else. I don't know. But I do know that as long as we live, we must stay true to ourselves.
Hello, and welcome to Film Church Radio. This is the podcast that treats cinema as a religion. It's Sunday. I'm Spartacus.
And I'm Crassus.
And we are here to talk about movies. Each week, Brandon and I alternate picking a film for us both to watch and discuss. This week, however, we are continuing our 2023 director retrospective on Stanley Kubrick. We have been watching chronologically the films of Kubrick and discussing them in detail each week. This week, we are discussing Spartacus from 1960, starring Kirk Douglas. This is the second and final collaboration between Kubrick and Douglas. Spartacus is a 4-time Oscar winner that is a rarity in the Kubrick filmography. It is a studio Hollywood epic. As we mentioned last episode, this sticks out a little in Kubrick's career as an oddity, and one that's not talked about as a Kubrick film. In this episode, we're hoping to find out why that is, and place it amongst his other works and see how it holds up. Before we do talk about the film and get into all the details, we would like to thank you for listening to the show, sending ratings and reviews and all that good stuff. We really appreciate it. Please go ahead and subscribe and then hit that bell to be notified when a new episode is available. Hint, hint, it's on a Sunday. And if you really, really enjoy the show, please share it with your friends. You can find us on all social media platforms at Film Church Radio, where you can leave us a comment or send a message about the show. And we do post some extra stuff on YouTube as well. And if you really do love it, like we said, go ahead, leave a rating and a review. Please go ahead and do that. Just put your favourite Kubrick film as the review. We'd love to read and see what your favourite Kubrick film is. Before we discuss the film, we do like to talk about what else we've been watching this week in our trailers section. This is where Brandon and I just talk briefly about other stuff we've been watching before we jump into the meat of the show. So, Brandon, what have you been watching, my friend?
Not much, but also much. It's been kind of a busy week for me. I have had a little bit of time off, and but I spent that time with Sarah, my girlfriend, so we just HBO'd and chilled all weekend.
Nice.
And instead of watching films, we watched TV series, and we binged all of The White Lotus.
Cool.
Both seasons. Have you seen it?
No, I've been in the room while Chelsea has been watching it, though.
Oh, okay. So you've been spoiled.
Yeah. Yeah, I do know the endings to both. I think the final 2 episodes, I kind of saw the majority of them. So
Yeah. We really enjoyed them a lot. They're kind of like murder mysteries, which are, I feel like, getting more and more popular right now.
Yeah.
And it works. It seems to work really well in this longer format, like better than, I think better than like the Glass Onion or the Death on the Nile and that kind of a thing. Just because you got more time to kind of spend with characters and, really heighten the tensions, I guess.
Yeah.
To the point, to just like this crazy boiling point, and then everything is just revealed kind of at the end. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. Great casting, great writing. Mike White, who I have seen in so many things. He's the creator of the show. I didn't realize that he was like such a big writer. he's like I said, I've seen him in so many things. You would recognize him. He's in School of Rock as Mr. Schneebly, the roommate, that Jack Black steals his identity. And then he's also in Orange County as one of the teachers. And then I saw him like when we were watching I guess it was the Golden Globes, and Jennifer Coolidge won, and she like thanked him and stuff. I was like, oh, I guess he created that show. And then started looking on his IMDb page, and he wrote School of Rock, and he wrote Orange County. And so he's been writing stuff for a long time, just has never really, I've never really known that about him, I guess. And those are some of my favorite movies. So like, it's like, oh, cool. I would probably really like this show. And it's very different, from what you would expect. I mean, just based on those two movies, different than than those movies, but very well written and great characters and stuff. So I'm glad he's getting like more attention now. I mean, so it's pretty cool. Yeah, that's awesome. Totes. So what about you? What have you been watching? That was it for me. I mean, it was like I said, we binged 2 seasons, so that just took up. I mean, that's a lot of content. Yeah. I've been trying to keep it very Kubrick related on my watching. Either films that I've been thinking about while watching Kubrick films, or adjacent films from like the same time period. So I rewatched Raging Bull, Scorsese's boxing epic, after Killer's Kiss and stuff like that. And it's great. I love how as the film progresses, it gets more and more violent. The boxing scenes are just shot so beautifully, and the rings look so big, but then it's like close up and you're kind of very in the middle of it. Pesci and De Niro are just phenomenal as just on screen partners. They could just be in a room talking to each other, and I'd give it 5 stars. It's amazing. It's a film I've been wanting to go back to for a while, and after watching Killer's Kiss, I was like, okay, we're gonna go back and watch it. And then I watched Ace in the Hole, the Billy Wilder film with Kirk Douglas in it. And I did wonder, there is a scene in there where he's like having a wash and he's topless. And I was like, I wonder if that was in his contract. Yeah, in his contract, even in 51, that he has to do a scene without his shirt on. And it's a film that I've seen before, but again, talking about Kirk Douglas, I wanted to go back and watch it because it came before Passive Glory. And his character is not as likable as Dax in Ace in the Hole. But he's excellent in it. I think he's excellent in the majority of stuff that I've seen him in. And Ace in the Hole is it always feels timely. With the fake news and stretching things out and making profits off of disasters and stuff like that. And it is a really interesting character study. So I watched that, and then I watched Rififi, which is a French film, which is like a heist thriller, a film that I'd seen a lot when I was researching The Killing. And one that I had on the shelf that I hadn't watched yet. So I watched that, and I absolutely loved that. It was nice. There was like a lot that seemed to be going on, but it didn't. Nothing was inconsequential. Everything kind of came together and paid off. And there's a wonderful 30-minute scene in the middle of the film where the heist is happening, and it's just silent, but it's so gripping and tense, And it's because it's never really explained before, kind of exactly what they're gonna do. You just you see them coming up with solutions to problems, but then the heist is really interesting. And really well done. And then it went somewhere where I wasn't expecting it to go for the third act, which was entertaining. And there's something about French cinema that I really enjoy when I watch it. Yeah, same here. Yeah, Rififi, I hadn't heard about it until it was mentioned in a script that you and I
Yeah,
had both read that our friend
yeah,
wrote. And yeah, so it's been on my list since then. I've been wanting to get to it. Um but yeah, this is making it much more intriguing now that I know a little bit about what it's about.
yeah. And I think that the thing that I like about French films is that the character portrayals aren't always like black and white. There's
Yeah.
some grey area in a lot of characters. I saw one review that said there's a scene about 20 minutes in that's quite brutal, and they said, "Oh, I just couldn't get past it." And it's like, and for me, it kind of told me more about the character than I guess it did for them, and I could
Right.
get past it. It is still shocking, but I don't think it tarnishes the film, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I'm trying to kind of say this without giving too much away.
Yeah,
It's
for
not
sure,
like a
yeah.
spoiler alert. It's not like a spoiler or anything, but it does, you know, have you thinking about what's right and wrong throughout the whole film.
Yeah. It sounds conceptually what you're talking about sounds similar to our discussion on Once Upon a Time in America. I don't know if it's
Yeah.
close to that at all, but
Yeah, I would say that it is. I think that it's definitely in the vein of, the new Hollywood, in that the characters aren't necessarily likable and they do some not so great things, but we're still rooting for them.
yeah.
Just because of the language of the camera and how it shoots them and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um,
Possibly something that might be missing from the movie we're about to talk about
Potentially.
later in a little while.
Yeah. And knowing that we're coming into this, like I said, I've been reading a lot on Kubrick, and I know that before Spartacus, he got kind of drafted to make this film. He was working with Brando on One-Eyed Jacks.
Yeah.
His a western that Brando was trying hard to get off the ground. Was attached to direct and worked on it for I think 6 months, and then had a falling out with Brando and not really going in the same direction.
Yeah.
So left the project only for Brando to finish directing and starring it himself. So I watched this one as well, just out of curiosity. And I, again, we're going to talk about it when we get onto Spartacus.
Yeah.
But I had a blast with it. It's really fun. I mean, Brando is just the biggest movie star in the world, and you can tell.
Yeah.
Every scene he's in is brill.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm excited
And I think
to
it's
watch
directed really well.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds good. I mean,
Yeah.
I love Brando, of course.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited to see something that he directed, but is also, yeah, because I mean, it's like, well, you always hear when you synonymous with Brando is like his is always like him taking his own direction in movies.
Yeah.
Anyway, except with the exception of maybe working with Ilya Kazan, who was maybe the only person who could actually direct him.
Yeah.
And everybody else just kind of had to shoot whatever he was doing. So it I'm interested to see him actually just doing whatever he wants anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I mean it works. It really does.
Yeah.
It's great, and I think the behind the scenes stuff is enough for a documentary. There's so much about it. There's a scene where he's on like a cliff top and the waves are crashing below him, and I was like, oh wow, that's a good shot. And then when I was doing some reading and watching a bit of the special features on the disc, it was like, yeah, he wasted 4 days or something before he was like, yep, the waves look how I want them.
Wow.
And it was just over budget, and took to say that Kubrick was working on it before Spartacus, and Spartacus is a notoriously long shoot,
Yeah.
and that still came out the year before One-Eyed Jacks.
Mm-hmm.
It tells you all you need to know about the production, I think, of that film. But I still think that a really good film was made.
Yeah.
Westerns aren't my favorite genre, and for them to pique my interest like that, I think they're good. So,
Nice.
yeah, I would definitely recommend, if you're doing this Kubrick retrospective as an adjacent film, seeking that one out.
Yeah. You've got all good watches this week. It's like
I know.
Raging Bull is the only one on your list that I have seen, and I absolutely love that movie. And then everything else is stuff that I've been wanting to watch. And like Ace in the Hole. Yeah, I mean, you kind of turned me on to Billy Wilder, and now I'm like, I've got to watch everything that he's done.
Yeah.
So that's still on my list,
and I think that's part and parcel of this like retrospective, is that it's just making me want to go and watch great films.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, it's kind of I'm having so much fun with it that the films that it's inspiring me to go and watch are some of my favorite films.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
thank you, Film Church.
Yeah, I would recommend all of those. So
yeah,
go and watch them all. But yeah, let's move on to our feature presentation. This week we are watching Spartacus from 1960. The letterbox summary and tagline is, "They trained him to kill for their pleasure, but they trained him a little too well." The rebellious Spartacus, born and raised a slave, is sold to a gladiator trainer. After weeks of being trained to kill for the arena, Spartacus turns on his owners and leads the other slaves in rebellion. As the rebels move from town to town, their numbers swell as escaped slaves join their ranks. Under the leadership of Spartacus, they make their way to southern Italy, where they will cross the sea and return to their homes. Spartacus. It is 3 hours and 20 minutes long. It is the first and last, I would say, feature film that Kubrick made as a director for hire. It's not really talked about in conversations with Kubrick. Mm-hmm. It's an oddity. I would say it's one of those films that before I was really deep invested into Kubrick, if you would ask me who had directed Spartacus, I probably wouldn't have been able to say Kubrick.
Yeah.
Because it just seems so left field.
Yeah.
And I know that this was a first watch for both of us. So how did you approach it after the last 4 weeks?
Well, as you know, I was pretty hyped for this movie because, I honestly love a good sword and sandal and sand epic. I grew up watching the Ten Commandments with Charlton Heston and Yul Brynner, and that's probably the peak of these sword, sand, and sandal epics for me. But that's because I grew up watching it,
Yeah.
And I've seen Ben-Hur a few times, and probably more than a few times, but definitely seen the Ten Commandments more. Anyway, and then we watched Colossus of Rhodes last year for our Sergio Leone retrospective, and we both loved it. It really was. It was kind of taking the sword and sand and sandal epic and making it a little more boyish and just kind of fun, adventurous. So I was super hyped because I kind of expected this to be just really epic, I guess, and tragic, or I don't know. And it was all right. it was very long. There were parts of it that I really liked, but it is very long and kind of drags, and it was definitely an interesting watch. There's so many stars in this movie, and not even stars, but just people that you've seen in other movies. There was let's see if I gotta look up their names. But when he fights in the arena at the beginning, with Woody Strode, as soon as I saw that guy, he was in the background. when you first see him, and I was like, is that the black cowboy from Once Upon a Time in the West? And it is,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
Which kind of connects our directors series that we've done.
Yeah.
And then you've got, who else? John Gavin, who's in Psycho. You've got John Dahl, who's in Rope.
Yeah.
You know, you've
Laurence
got
Olivier from Rebecca.
Yeah, exactly. Laurence Olivier, who I didn't even recognize until like halfway through the movie. I was like, wait a minute, which one is Laurence Olivier? And then I was like, oh, he's a little bit older in this, but I mean, he just kind of completely disappears into that character, which is great.
Yeah.
Peter Ustinov, who is a new for me. I haven't seen him in anything else, but I mean, right off the bat, within the first 30 minutes of this movie, I was like, this guy is really good, and he's got all the best lines.
Yeah.
And he plays them so well because he's really funny. He's just like, yeah, I love the line where he's like, you know, use our second best wine. Oh no! Actually, use our best wine, but small goblets.
Yeah.
You know, just stuff like that.
Yeah.
Really helped you to kind of like the character, and then he turns out to be like a redeemable character by the end, I guess. Well, I mean, yeah, sort of.
Yeah.
You know, he's not completely evil, I guess. He's just in it for the money.
Yeah.
And trying to protect himself. So yeah, I mean, there was a lot to like, but it was just, you know, I kind of because it was Kubrick, I kind of expected a little more of Kubrick there.
Yeah.
But then I really didn't see anything that made me feel like, oh, there he is. There's Kubrick's touch. There was really nothing. And there is stuff there, you know, once you learn about the film, there is he did influence the movie a lot, and the movie wouldn't be what it is without him.
Yeah.
Especially like the action sequences. But I only know that because I've read about it. It's like just watching it without knowing anything, I really couldn't see any of him there.
Yeah.
Especially with the shooting, I expected the cinematography to be a bit different, but it really just kind of looks like all the other films in this genre.
I think that's the problem, isn't it? I think that once you kind of sign on for this big budget, like Hollywood studio epic, is that you kind of get chewed up a little bit.
Yeah.
Like Kubrick's career so far has been kind of independent productions that he's managed to get distributed by like United Artists or whatever.
Yeah.
Whereas this is he's actually working on a set. He's not in control. There's people above him telling him what they want, mostly Kirk Douglas, and he is just there to kind of organize the chaos, you know.
Yeah.
And especially with a film of that, like just going through that cast list, as you said, you know, you've got some heavy hitters. I know that Charles Lawton and Laurence Olivier really didn't get on with each other.
Yeah.
Throughout the filming, and they kind of were constantly sparring with each other. Kirk Douglas and Kubrick himself were like, you know, butting heads a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And I think in the end it is just point and shoot. You know, we'll just for Kubrick, he knew he didn't have control, and he just wanted to kind of get it over with.
Yeah.
Not to say that it's like rushed, because there are some like really beautiful like scenes and some really well constructed like sequences, but like it's not it doesn't have a stamp on it. It's not, you know, Kubrick's film.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not, you know, it's not a terrible film. It did really well when it came out. I think the timing was right because it was you know, close to the civil rights, and also I mean just about like having more freedom, you know, and everything that the 60s was kind of about. I mean, this is obviously, it came out in 60, so it's like that. I think this kind of maybe fed into that mindset of like the free spirit and stuff.
Yeah.
But it to me it just doesn't really hold up that well anymore. And I think partially because for me, honestly, like Kirk Douglas is not right for this.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, he does have that persona. I would say that the character of Spartacus is not right for Kirk Douglas, I would say.
Yeah,
Because I think
exactly.
he could definitely hold this film, but as a character, Spartacus is so boring. And I don't mean to say that like it sounds a lot worse than I mean it, but I don't. He's got. I mean, apart from you know treating women right, there's not really anything in there that's that sets him aside from anybody else.
Yeah, yeah. And
He's
go ahead.
he's just a guy,
Yeah,
really, And I think that we were talking about Dax last episode on Paths of Glory being, you would follow him into battle. Like with Spartacus, there's just nothing like that.
yeah. It doesn't seem
You don't
like
get that
it.
same characterization. Yeah.
Well, see, and I do not think Kirk Douglas is a bad actor, but like
No.
you're saying, it just doesn't fit right anymore. Like maybe
Yeah.
it did at the time, but in just today's world, it just doesn't. He doesn't seem for one thing, he doesn't seem like a slave. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He doesn't really act like a slave. He doesn't really. Yeah, I don't believe him as a slave. Like there's a point where he's like giving a speech before the battle, and that was probably my least favorite part of his portrayal. The part that just really stood out to me is like, this isn't working, because
Yeah.
it almost seemed like he's just like this good country boy.
Yeah.
Like he just seems American. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't believe this. So that's the part I think where it mostly falls apart there, because, well, for one thing, it's like this was a project that Kirk Douglas produced. Like this wouldn't exist without him.
Yeah.
So it's like you can't really have this movie without him. And so to be for the problem with the movie to be him is like, well,
Yeah.
what are you gonna do? They made the best
Yeah.
movie possible, I think, and it's still a really great movie, and I think I will like it more and more the more I go back to it. Now that I've kind of wrapped my head around.
Yeah.
Once I kind of decide what I don't like about a movie, I can sort of forget about it and keep enjoying all the things I really do like, and I think that I will the more I go back to it.
Yeah, I mean, this whole film, talking about Douglas, is a vanity project for Douglas, really. He went up for Ben-Hur and didn't get it, lost out to Charlton Heston, and was like, fine, I'm going to go make my own epic about, a heroic person. So that's exactly what he did. This is kind of him, like, sticking the middle finger up to the Ben-Hur project, being like, I can do it too.
Yeah.
And I think that all those, things that you said there definitely show throughout the film. He's not the kind of actor that can lead this, I don't think. I think that, like you said, Laurence Olivier really falls into it, as does Charles Lawton. The supporting cast around him are great, but he does stick out like a sore thumb.
Yeah.
He's not, I don't know, it's not that he's not heroic enough, it's just that like I said, his character is so bland that there's just nothing there for him to get his teeth into. It's just
he's not complex enough, and that's kind of the stuff that I've been reading about this film, and kind of like what you were saying earlier about Rififi, is that sometimes you have these characters that make you question what is good, what is evil, and he doesn't have any real kind of moral. He's just a really good guy in the whole movie, and so there's no deep complexity to him.
It's the kind of character that only Hollywood can produce.
Right.
If they could have him descending from the heavens, I'm sure they would have done.
Yeah.
You know, and maybe that's to talk about the kind of film that this is. You know, you were talking about the Ten Commandments, and you know, especially the biblical epics.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm sure they're taking a note from those as well, and kind of leaning into that side of it as well.
Yeah. Well, I do appreciate that this is kind of a biblical epic with no
Yeah.
mention of Christianity.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so I do like that. But yeah, it's like, but still, he's kind of a Jesus figure.
Yeah.
He has no sins. You know.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And as a result, I mean, he's a titular character. He gets a lot of screen time, and they're the bits that you forget.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you know. Yeah, it's a shame. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess there's really no arc to his character, really. I mean,
No.
he's just a man who dreams of freedom, and that summarizes the whole movie.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
A man dreams of freedom.
Because I did think that the original, like the beginning of the film, the first hour or so where he is a slave and they're getting ready for the arena and stuff, was really good. And that, like, I was really interested by that. And then kind of when they break out and go free, it just kind of goes, it loses it a bit. It's just like, okay, they're here, they're there, you know, what are they doing?
Yeah.
You know? And it just loses it a bit. And then it is like 2.5 hours of them kind of getting ready for this big showdown. And the end battle doesn't seem to last very long. I feel like
it doesn't.
When they go over the top in Passive Glory, that long shot, I was expecting like, okay, we're at the battle, here we go. This is going to be, because we had like 50 minutes left. I was like, this is going to be the end of the film. It's going to be a 50-minute battle. And it's like 10 minutes.
Yeah, I was disappointed with how short it was because what we did see of the battle was some of the best stuff in this movie.
Yeah.
And apparently there weren't any battles planned to be filmed until Kubrick got involved, right? From what they said in one of the documentaries, which is crazy to me because it definitely is one of the best parts. It was Kubrick's idea to have the burning like logs that roll down, which is super cool.
Yeah.
And then the part where he just like lops this guy's arm off, I was like, where did that come from? That was amazing. Like more of this. I was like, here we go. Finally, we got somewhere. This is gonna make me really like this movie. And then, like you said, it just ends, and you're like,
yeah,
poo.
Yeah. back to the character beats, I guess.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, it is very important in Hollywood for a few reasons. I mean, the first is that they had that it was written by Dalton Trumbo, who was blacklisted, and this was the first time that he had since the blacklist had a writing credit with his real name on the credits, which caused it kind of put an end to all that, or started the end, I should say, of kind of the blacklist and
the beginning
and
of
people
the end.
being afraid to do it. Yeah, because they were struggling with it. I mean, they wanted to put it on at some point, but the studio was a bit like, I don't think we should do it. And this is kind of where the final nail in the coffin came for Kubrick and Douglas, because they were trying to come up with an idea of like how to get his name on it, and Kubrick was like, I can just take the credit. Like, you can just put written by Stanley Kubrick. And Douglas was like, wouldn't you feel embarrassed, like, to put your name on a script that someone else wrote? And Kubrick was like, no. So they didn't go that route. They actually, put Trumbo's name on it. But I think for Douglas, that was like his fight. He was like, okay, we're not on the same page. Kubrick's in it for, his own kind of progression of a career. I'm trying to change the landscape of the industry.
Yeah, I mean, and both of their reasonings, both of their motivations are justified. Justifiable motivations, I think, because like Kubrick at this point in his career just needs a big win so that he can really do what he wants to do, and Kirk Douglas is already successful in trying to make, just trying to like do what he can to help others, and help the industry move in a positive direction. So like both But it's like, and then Kubrick maybe wants the same thing, but he's not in a position to do that yet. He needs a big success like this to be able to do what he wants. It's like, even though, like we're talking about, there's no hints of Kubrick seemingly here, stupidly, like, this is what he kind of needed on his resume, is like, okay, I've done this huge epic with all of these huge stars. It's become a huge success. It's won Academy Awards and also been commercially successful. Like, once you prove that to the producers in Hollywood, it's like you can kind of start navigating and doing whatever you want.
Yeah.
Plus, I mean, it sounds like he was pretty confident on the set, from outside perspectives. Who knows how he actually felt while he was shooting this movie. But even if he was nervous on the inside or unsure, I'm sure after the film came out, he felt much more confident to handle bigger productions later on, like Barry Lyndon and Full Metal Jacket and The Shining, and all these much higher budget, bigger productions, lots of cast. I mean, this movie has so many people in it. Like, you get that under your belt, like, you feel like you can do anything, I'm sure.
I was going to say, if you're going to do one studio film, like, what a film for it to be.
Yeah.
This huge historical epic with so many well-known people in it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he didn't need to do it again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think that, and I do realize that both stories, I mean, the one I told last week as well about, the script being changed when Douglas arrived on set and stuff. Both of these stories are from Douglas's autobiography, so they are probably weighed more in light of Douglas.
Yeah.
I think maybe take it with a pinch of salt, but from what we can tell, he was looking to be able to make the films he wanted to make by being commercially successful. We saw that kind of last week, and then this week definitely is like, I don't think he would have taken this if Paths of Glory hadn't have been as controversial, and he would have gone straight into maybe not One-Eyed Jacks, but Lolita, because that was what he was trying to get made at the time. But yeah, because of not being able to be financially successful, he had to kind of take this to prove himself again, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, and I feel like Douglas kind of knew what he was getting into with Kubrick. It's like, I think that's part of the reason he called him up to come and take over this movie, because they had another director and they shot a couple of days, right? And then called up Kubrick. He called up Kubrick because he had worked with him before, and I feel like his motivation for that was because Kubrick was so visionary and would have an opinion. I feel like that's what Douglas felt like he needed, was someone who, from my point of view anyway, was someone who just had a strong opinion about stuff, and had a direction to give. And I'm like, he had to have known that, sometimes that direction they wouldn't agree, but, he probably knew also that he had enough. I mean, he's a producer and the star, so he probably knew he had enough power to wrangle him in when he needed to. But
I mean, Douglas was pulling for Kubrick before the film even started shooting, because he'd enjoyed Paths of Glory so much. But then the studio went with Anthony Mann, who was I don't know if he was at the studio at the time or at another studio, but he was proven. He did a lot of westerns and kind of looking for the next step. Could shoot really well. And then he shot a little bit of film, and then Douglas and him had a huge falling out. And that's when Kubrick was called in, pretty much with 24 hours notice. Hadn't seen a script, hadn't seen any sets, but was called in to kind of come and finish it. And coming in at that point, I mean, how much control are you gonna have? You
Yeah.
know? And I think this is where he started to drift away and like not be as accessible. I know that Douglas said that like it was just hard to kind of rekindle that friendship that they had on Past of Glory.
Yeah.
And Douglas himself really tried, but Kubrick was really aloof and just didn't really want to be part of this gang, the Hollywood gang.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I get it. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
like so many, like it's all just kind of like a lot of games that you're having to navigate,
Yeah.
relationship games.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
Yeah, keeping everybody happy. And
Yeah. Yeah, and he's realizing that he just wants to be an artist. He wants
Yeah.
he wants to create what he wants to create. He wants to he wants complete creative control. He wants final edit.
Yeah.
He wants all these things that he can't get if he continues to make director for hire movies,
Yeah. And he had signed on with Douglas's production company to make like 7 films.
How did he get out of that?
Well, I mean, there's no real details. It just said that in 1961, after the film had come out, he went up to meet with Douglas and was just like, I just want to be released from my contract.
Wow.
Then they kind of, figured it out somehow.
Yeah.
I guess the relationship had deteriorated so much that Douglas was like, yeah, this isn't the person that I'm going to have a, long and fruitful partnership with.
Yeah, I mean, for the best, I guess. I mean,
Yeah.
I would be curious to know what kind of stuff they might have done after that, but like, Kirk Douglas, I just think of him as such a classical actor.
Yeah.
That it's hard to picture him in anything else that Kubrick has done.
I know. Yeah. I think that Douglas obviously wasn't going the same way as Kubrick.
Yeah.
Kubrick was going to be very more art house, I guess, than like Douglas was at this time. He was still trying to change the face of Hollywood and, mix that up. But
and
I don't
Kubrick was like, I don't like Hollywood.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. But yeah,
it's just it is kind of cool that I mean we're gonna talk about this more as we get into other films, but it is cool that like someone so uninterested in the business of Hollywood was able to be so successful.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but I mean, he had to do this. He had to do this one film, though.
Exactly.
In order to get there, And
I think that's where you see just that raw talent that he had, is that even when he wasn't in control, it can still win 4 Academy Awards and still look absolutely gorgeous. You know?
Exactly. Yeah, a couple of the crazy things about this movie in terms of Academy Awards to me is that it got Best Cinematography, which it seems like, based on what I've read, that like Kubrick and the cinematographer fought a lot, and Kubrick shot a lot of the movie himself.
Yeah.
So really that belonged to Kubrick.
Yeah.
And like how embarrassing for that cinematographer to be fighting with the director about the cinematography so much, and then to get an Academy Award that really doesn't even belong to him.
Yeah.
And that this is also the only time that an actor won an Academy Award for a Kubrick movie, with Ustinov.
Yeah. I think Peter Sellers was nominated, but nobody else ever won. This was the only credit. And I feel like, it's the same with like Hitchcock, is that, he always had a difficult relationship with the Oscars. And maybe that's something we'll see moving forward with Kubrick as well. They just don't recognize, true masters of the medium straight away.
Well, I mean, Charlie Chaplin, did he really ever get recognized? Or
no, I mean,
Buster Keaton.
Exactly, like all these, people that changed cinema forever.
Yeah.
It's a real shame.
I mean, these are like the Mozart and the Beethovens of cinema. You know, the people that everyone in the industry references and takes inspiration from, and like laid the foundation for the art form.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, this is awards bait, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah,
you've got
exactly.
the actor of the moment in a very heroic role. You've got an up and coming director on a big budget. This incredible supporting cast. It's like this was made for one reason, and that's to pretty much get awards.
Yeah, it probably frustrated Kirk Douglas that he didn't get nominated or anything. But I mean, it sounds like that was partially his fault for not, because didn't Kubrick want to kind of create more complexity in the character, and Douglas
was like, no.
No. Well, it also sounds like Douglas was afraid to go off the page because Trumbo wrote it. He wanted to.
Yeah.
He felt like the artistic value was in the script.
Yeah, I think probably, and I think that with Ustinov, why he won some of the things that I've been reading recently is that because he had a lot of scenes with Charles Lawton. Lawton refused to read Trumbo's words due to the the blacklist.
Yeah.
So improvised a lot, which meant that the scenes that he had with Ustinov were pretty much all improvised for both of them. So, arguably, that Best Supporting Actor Oscar is due to the fact that they went off script.
Wow.
Which, probably didn't... Douglas probably wasn't that pleased with anyway.
Yeah.
But Ustinov told a great story that he got a letter from Laurence Olivier, and he just basically said when he won the Oscar, he was like, "Thank you for supporting me so much," which is lovely.
Yeah.
But I mean, coming on to Olivier, I think he steals the show.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of. I mean, because he's the more complex character, right? I mean, he's...
Yeah, I mean, there's the added scene, the famous one with oysters and snails between him and Tony Curtis.
Which I did not catch the first time I watched. I think there's so much dialogue in this movie that, there's scenes where I'm just like, get on with it.
Yeah.
But it is interesting that for the time, and such a big Hollywood movie, that they would have like this bisexual undertone.
Well, it was originally cut and then replaced for like the re-release, I think for the 50th anniversary or something like that. Tony Curtis was still alive, so redubbed his lines. But Olivier was dead, so they got Anthony Hopkins to do it.
Whoa!
So,
wow.
Yeah. So the words you hear being spoken in that scene is Hopkins, and there's like a special thanks to him at the end as well.
That's why it feels so creepy.
Yeah, I mean, when you go back and listen to it, it's like you can tell it's Hopkins. But
yeah,
it does
that's
sound
crazy.
Like
yeah, because he's like, "Do you like oysters or snails?"
Yeah, exactly. But it does change the film. Like that scene, it adds a lot of weight to like the scenes in like the saunas and like where he's talking to Julius Caesar. There's a lot of kind of undertones that I don't think probably would have come out, no pun intended, if that scene hadn't been put in there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of homoeroticism going on.
Yeah.
Which is, again, I wonder why it's... Because it doesn't serve any narrative purpose.
Yeah, but...
I'm not sure.
But it does add to the...
Yeah, it does.
To the complexities of the characters, like you said. And then you also have... you get the sense, like, in the scene where he's got Spartacus's wife, Verena, played by Gene Simmons, the scene with her and Laurence Olivier where she's, he's I can't even explain the scene that well, but like, or I kind of lost my point. Why was I talking about this scene?
The character development and the undertones of homosexuality.
Yeah, I guess in that scene it adds this layer of like, is this guy evil? He seems evil,
Yeah.
but also it seems like he's trying to do better or something. Not that
Yeah.
that makes him redeemable, but it does have this hint of, is he trying to do the right thing? I don't like,
Yeah.
what is his motivation?
Yeah.
So it at least adds this like complexity to it, whether right or wrong, it doesn't matter. It just makes the film deeper, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I think, when I rewatch this, it's going to be his character that I kind of look forward to seeing again. Spartacus just reminds me of Tarzan. It's just the kind of me good, you bad,
Yeah.
kind of mentality of.
I think if he had been more like, maybe drawn to violence in some, like took some pleasure in violence in some way, it would add this, like level of haunting scariness to him.
Yeah.
That
there's a reason why he's kind of talked about.
Yeah, and like maybe add this theme of like live by the sword, die by the sword kind of a thing. But it's like, what are you going to do when you're trying to revolt?
Yeah, exactly. I think they're trying to paint him as like this Robin Hood type character. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of nuance with Robin Hood in terms of like, his playfulness and, the way that certain things have gone and his personal, personal feelings towards the king and all that kind of stuff. Whereas this is just like, okay, he was a slave. He doesn't think it's right. This is his journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's like, I think this film probably did so well at the time because of being so close to the civil rights movement and like kind of reiterating like that he has a dream of freedom.
Yeah, exactly.
And they even say in the movie, it's like he dreamed of it 2,000 years before it would actually happen.
Which is very depressing.
Yeah.
I think it's meant to be like look how ahead of his time this guy was, and in reality, it's just like, ugh, this is, we're not going to get out of this anytime soon. Arguably, the more heroic is Drabber, played by Woody Strode, the gladiator that he fights, because not only does he kind of best him in battle, but he also, he takes his shot while he's got it. He throws the spear up into the viewing area and then tries to scale it to kill them. And that again, I think that's where it lost me, because I'd seen that and I was like, oh, like this is a hero. This is someone that you can get behind, and no one else in the film ever reaches that point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he would have been a great Spartacus. But yeah, I mean, in that moment, you're like, oh, Spartacus lost, and you don't really, I don't know. Yeah, you never really latch onto him, like, like, I don't know, like you're kind of rooting for him, but not really.
Yeah. I mean, you want the slaves to be free, and you want everyone to, him to succeed.
But you're never like, this is my guy.
Yeah, it's more the unit you want to succeed. With him, it's just like, I don't, whatever,
Yeah.
I do want to mention one of my favorite people ever, Tony Curtis, who's in this film. I absolutely love Tony Curtis. He, when I was starting out on this calling to watch films and talk about them all the time, I read his autobiography when I was just about to start film school, and wrote him a letter. And I was just like, hey,
cool.
Huge fan, love what you do, thank you so much. And he sent a signed picture back. And then he, obviously he has passed away since then, but he's always been just one of my favorite people. If he's in a film, I'm probably going to watch it.
Yeah.
So it was really good to see him. He hasn't got a lot to do, unfortunately, but
he plays Antoninus. Sorry. I was like,
Antoninus,
I know I've heard the name. Why am I saying it wrong? Yeah, the singer guy.
He does, yeah. And I think that's, one, again, I do like the scene where they're having to fight and the one that survives is going to get put on the cross.
Yeah.
That's an interesting duel, but it never feels earned. It doesn't feel like he's kind of around Spartacus a lot, but I don't think they kind of pay much attention to that friendship.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
Yeah. But I did want to give a shout out to old Tony Curtis. Jamie Lee Curtis's dad as well.
Oh, nice. I did not know that.
Uh-huh.
Interesting. Yeah. Good to know.
So, love you, Tone.
That's awesome. Well, that's cool that he sent you a signed picture and everything. That's awesome.
I know. Yeah. So, he's always my favorite. I like to talk about him whenever I can.
Yeah. That's great.
One last thing I do want to talk about with Kirk Douglas. He gave my favorite quote ever on Kubrick. And I think I've already kind of told you about this because I just loved it when I read it.
Yeah.
But he summarized his feelings about working on Spartacus with Stanley Kubrick by saying, "You don't have to be a nice person to be extremely talented. You could be a shit and be talented, and conversely, you could be the nicest guy in the world and not have any talent. Stanley Kubrick is a talented shit."
That's pretty great. I
I
think
that just sums up, how this ended for both of them.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's like I think there's more to that we don't know. Because
I'm sure.
I mean, plenty of people have very good things to say about Kubrick and that he was the nicest person ever. So it's like,
Curtis said that in his autobiography, he said that he was the greatest director that he worked with and a genius.
Yeah.
And he worked with Wilder, and loads of other people. So I think it's definitely I think working as an actor for Kubrick was probably very rewarding, but then trying to collaborate with Kubrick was the hardest thing in the world.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we're seeing Douglas probably had a really great time on Paths of Glory working with Kubrick and getting that performance. But then when he was trying to manage Kubrick, he was like, I can't do it.
Yeah.
He's an asshole.
Yeah. I mean, when you've got that many cooks in the kitchen that all are great at what they do, it's like who's going to have final say?
Exactly.
You got to pick one and get out of their way. Are you going to be the chef or the sous chef?
That's right. Yeah. And I think after this, Kubrick is definitely the chef.
Yes. Dope. Yeah. I mean, I think I'll watch this again maybe, but
yeah,
not my favorite Kubrick film. It was funny because I was mentioning to Sarah recently, you should watch some of these Kubrick movies with me. I think you might like them because he kind of, he's a popular director, but he's, the subject matter of his films kind of is pushing the boundaries and getting complex about, human issues. And and I was like, she was like, well, what's the next one you're watching? And I was like, Spartacus. And she was like, oh, I've seen that so many times. I'm not watching that. I was like, really? She's like, yeah. She's like, our mom would get that movie from the library all the time. She's like,
wow.
I've seen it way too much.
Yeah, I feel like probably, Kirk Douglas is a very a fan favorite amongst women, I would say.
Yeah.
Especially seeing him in the gladiator outfit, I know is a crowd pleaser. So
yeah. So I just thought that was funny. So hopefully I get her to watch some of these other ones and get her opinion on them.
I mean, next we'll talk about what's next in just a minute, but might be a bit of a tricky one.
Yeah, for sure.
to win someone over with.
Yeah.
Do you want to guess what we've rated on Letterboxd? I feel like we've kind of run out of things that we want to talk about.
Yeah, let's do that. I'm gonna say you rated it 3.
Okay, I'm gonna say you rated it 3.5.
You win.
Oh, I rated it 2.5.
Wow.
Yeah.
It
was okay. This isn't my favorite genre at all. It's not something that I look at for pleasure. I was looking forward to watching it, but yeah, I didn't connect with Spartacus. Didn't see anything in there that was particularly interesting. So 2.5.
Bit of a wet Spart.
That's right. Okay, so let's rate it.
Put it in our Kubrick ranking.
Yes.
So
this,
far,
I think this is going to be the first week that the latest film hasn't gone top.
Yeah.
Yeah. So far, like you said, number 1, Paths of Glory. Number 2, The Killing. Number 3, Killer's Kiss. Number 4, Fear and Desire.
I feel like it is definitely not better than Killer's Kiss.
Yeah.
I think it's better than Fear and Desire.
I think it's a lot better than Fear and Desire. I think that the trouble, it's better in different ways than Fear and Desire. I think that Killer's Kiss is a more interesting film when talking about Kubrick, and that's kind of how we're rating them. But yeah, I would agree. I think between Killer's Kiss and Fear and Desire is a perfect place to put Spartacus.
Yeah. I think if you're trying to learn filmmaking, you're going to learn more from Fear and Desire than you will from Spartacus.
Yeah.
Or if you're doing a Stanley Kubrick watch through, I think you could skip Spartacus, but I wouldn't skip Fear and Desire just because there's more to learn from it.
Yeah. Are you making an argument to put it bottom?
No, I'm not. I mean, just objectively, Spartacus is a better film, but
yeah,
I'd say if you're trying to learn something, you're not going to really get anything from Spartacus.
And I think that's what we were hinting at the top of the show about the fact that it's not really mentioned with the other films of Kubrick. It's kind of it's an oddity. Yeah, and I think that's because it's just not. It's not Kubrick.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but anyway, Spartacus goes in at number 4 in our top 5 at the moment. How far down the list will it fall as we carry on?
Yeah, it might just stay right there.
Yeah, it's hard to see. I mean, I know, I don't want to give away spoilers, but we're about to start hitting the big time. This is, I feel like this first 5 is kind of like the beginning of Kubrick. And next week we're going to hit the beginning of the end of Kubrick, which is a weird way to put it. But,
well, the beginning of him being satisfied with the films he's making.
Yeah, agreed. So what are we watching next week?
Next week is going to be Lolita from 1962.
Awesome. A film I've watched a long time ago.
Same. I watched it probably 8 years ago.
Yeah.
So,
probably the same for me too. Well,
yeah.
I wonder if we watched it at the same time.
Maybe.
Unbeknownst to us.
Same day.
Well, I'm excited to rewatch it and talk to you about it and see Kubrick back in his full force. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too.
Well, I think that brings us to the end of the show. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at Film Church Radio, and you can follow us individually on Letterboxd. Brandon is at Salmonscope, and I am at Walker Lewis 3007 to keep up with what we've been watching. We have all of our back episodes streaming on all good podcast platforms. Please leave us a rating review so we know if you like the film. If you didn't, and what you would pick for us to watch in the future. Those reviews really do help other people find the show, so if you do have the time and are so inclined, please go ahead and do that. All that I've got left to say, though, Brandon, is...
What's your name?
You don't want to know my name. I don't want to know your name.
Just a friendly question.
Gladiators don't make friends. If we're ever matched in the arena together, I have to kill you.
Ooh. So that doesn't happen.
Ooh. Okay, fine. We won't be friends. I'm not talking to you again.
Yeah.
That was great. All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Say Film Church prayers.
Amen.
Amen.